Hello and a very warm welcome to you. My name is Ray Lavery.
My name is Jessica Crooks.
And together we manage and run Trans Matters Worldwide and Trans London Meetup Group.
We do in-person events and online events once or twice a month. And right now we're hoping to move into webinars. We're bringing in experts and trying to educate.
That's it. And so originally this channel was actually my female to male transition line, but we have upgraded it from there. And as Jess has said, what we are going to do is we are going to do all things transgender. So there'll be fresh webinars, there'll be fresh interviews, there'll be some fun stuff if we can think about it and just record it, and things just to keep you occupied and have some fun and help you along your transgender journey. So to make sure that you don't miss out on anything, all you have to do is hit the subscribe button, and that way you will get all of the notifications of what we have coming up and you won't miss out on anything. So enjoy that and we will see you in there. So take care and goodbye. And hello and a very warm welcome to you to another webinar. My name is Ray Lavery. And Jess Crooks is also here with us, and we are interviewing today the wonderful Eva Echo, and she's going to talk to us all about trans joy and trans positivity. Now, if you are watching this on the YouTube channel, and if you have a question or a comment, please just stick it in the comment section below. We will be monitoring those and we will get back to you. If you want to know how to get in contact with Eva, all of her contact details are also in the description box below. And other than that, let's go over to the webinar.
First of all, thank you. Thank you for having me. I'm really, really glad to be part of this. My name's Eva Echo, for those who don't know me. My pronouns are she, they. I am an activist, a writer, and a public speaker. I do a number of things as well. So I am Director of Innovation at Birmingham Pride. I'm one of the directors at Trans in the City. I sit on the Crown Prosecution Service's hate crime panel, and I also work with the Met Police in their L&D department, basically helping to bring a community input into how officers are trained. You're on mute.
Amazing. I've got questions about every one of those positions. But to start with, I was just wondering how you sort of got into this line of work and sort of what it means to you, really.
Yeah, I mean, I've got to say, I don't think I ever thought, you know what, I'm going to be an activist. I'm going to tear my hair out every day when I see the news. I think I started like a lot of people. It was about me. I came out like 6 years ago now, and at the time, I'd finished a UK tour with because I used to be a musician, and I thought, oh, you know what, I'll literally take time out, figure who I am, because this sort of this feeling of not feeling right, not being who I need to be, has always dogged me ever since I was about 4 or 5. So I thought I will finally take time out, figure it out once and for all, get my mental health back in check. And I took that time out, and I ended up coming to the conclusion that I am trans. I've always been trans, and it's been one of the causes for a lot of my underlying mental health conditions all throughout my life, because it's been that kind of internal battle where you kind of know, but you don't want to admit it. And then there are lots of frustrations, a lot of internalized anger, because you know you can't do anything. But I suppose I gave myself the chance and thought, you know what, I've tried trying to present masculine in so many different ways, and I was just like a bad actor. You know, one role wouldn't work, I would wake up in A&E, you know, like after doing something bad, and then try another role thinking that's the role for me, and it would just be this vicious cycle where I'd go through all these different roles and I'd exhaust them all. And I got to the point where after tour I thought, what's the one role I haven't tried? And that was to literally just be me and say to the world, this is who I am. And that ultimately led to me coming out as transgender. And I honestly thought I would literally just medically transition, get things going, and then just slip back into music and running a business with my wife. But that never happened. And I think I was, at the time I was writing an online blog, and quite naively, I thought, no one's going to read this. It's just for me to externalize my thoughts. I can just rant away. But, you know, of all the pages on the internet, why would anyone look at mine? But for some reason, people did and started to reach out. And that's I guess when it dawned on me that I'm not the only one, I used to think it was just me. But when you start hearing of stories from other people, you start to realize, hang on, there's something within this. You know, it's not just me. I'm not a freak. There is definitely something more to this. So I started talking to more people from all around the world. And that's when I realized I can't just transition and go back to being me, because I have a privilege. You know, I have certain access to things, and it would be unfair of me to simply just go on my merry way, you know, being able to kickstart my transition privately and just kind of go back to everyday life. I thought, well, no, I can't do that. And being, you know, neurodivergent, that neurospicy side of me is like, well, no, we've got to do this for everybody. So yeah, I thought, well, what can I actually do? And I just became more vocal about it. And gradually I got more involved in different organizations, different areas of social injustice. And you know what? I absolutely love it. And as much as I love being a musician back then, I think my outlook now is this needs me more than the world of music does. So I'm happy to throw myself into this and now actually have a career out of it.
Yeah, I think you're very much looking at two people who've had that same thought in terms of, you know, I think myself and Ray both came out slightly later in life, and it's that thing of, what can we do? How can we help this? Is there anything we can do? And I think those are going to be people who are watching who are feeling that isn't necessarily the case. But that's what I like about your content online, because I think that is the sort of, you can. Yeah, it's really great. It's really great to see.
Well, I mean, at the end of the day, it's like all the cards are stacked against us as a community. And if we can just do, you know, even if we just reach one person in everything that we do, that's one more person who doesn't have to go through all the shit that I've personally been through, that, you know, you and Ray have been through. If we can just do something to soften it, and then over time, as generations come and go, that will become even softer, to the point where there is no coming out, there is no shock, there is, you know, none of that. It's literally just, well, this is who I am.
Yeah, and I think if I may, just a part on that is that the visibility is a very big thing. There's a lot of noise out there in the wrong direction, and you know, there's so many more people who are doing such amazing things, but that seems to be either hidden, or they're just like, oh, it's just me, no one's going to listen to me. Whereas actually, like, no, it's so important to be that role model and just to walk around your normal life being that role model without being the activist, you know, just by getting on with who you are, because then people realize, well, hang on, there's not really a big deal here. Exactly. You know, there's no disease I'm going to catch here.
Yeah,
you know,
like being an activist, like being visible is the most simplest yet most important form of activism, because you are literally proving people wrong. You know, if they've got some sort of idea about you that's incorrect because they've been reading certain papers or watching certain news channels, by you just going to work, having lunch, you know, coming home from work, watching TV, doing everyday things that cisgender people do, you are proving that all those myths, all those horror stories are completely untrue. And you know what? You don't actually have to do anything different. You just exist.
Well, I think that's probably is a good segue in terms of we're here talking about positivity. We're here talking about trans joy. And I suppose the filmmaker in me wants to sort of define that as best as we can to begin with. So I was wondering, what does the term trans joy mean to you?
That's a good question. I think for me, it's the littlest things. You know, when you're asked a question like that, I guess your immediate go-to is, you know, a big event or something substantial there's change for you, that, you know, that creates that gender euphoria, because, you know, it's not anything that we speak about often. For me, it's quite literally just being able to, you know, when we're out, refer to my wife as my wife still, because I came out 4 years into a marriage and I was convinced she was going to leave me. You always hear these horror stories of, you know, trans women get divorced because their partners, their wives just think, you know what, this isn't for me, this is not what I signed up to. But actually going through this journey with my wife at my side, and by this November we'll be married for 10 years, it's been amazing. And to still say this is my wife, you know, it's amazing, because it shows for me how far I've come. And that people can be accepting that love is love, and we don't have to always worry about being shunned or rejected. And even other things, just like sat on the bed with my wife watching trash on TV in my pajamas, just kind of thinking, I once set myself an expiry date and I didn't think I'd ever make it past that. But here I am enjoying life and never thought I'd get married, let alone, you know, get this far. So for me, trans joy is being my authentic self and being able to do the little things that so many cisgender people take for granted, because just being able to exist in such a positive space at home with people that love me, it's just absolutely amazing, and nothing touches that. You know, you could say, here's £1 million, you know, you could spend that, but you know, it really is something that money cannot buy.
Wow, there's so much of that I relate to. So I've been in a relationship with my partner for the last 12 years. I've been trans for the last 3. And I think very similarly, I was very almost resigned to the idea that that relationship probably wasn't going to continue. And even post that, you know, Rachel, there's very, very little out there in terms of that happening. There's 100 stories on Reddit of the opposite happening and those relationships ending, which was terrifying for both of us, but it's so rare you hear the other way around.
Yeah, and I think that goes back to like mainstream media. Happy news doesn't sell. Happy news does not get your attention. If you look at traditional news programs, you know, they always finish with "and something slightly different," and that's your happy bit right at the end.
Yeah.
And we're raised in a society where we focus on the negative. We focus on all the doom and gloom that's happening in the world. That's why it's called news. And we've been told that that is what you need to know about. That is, you know, these are the essential things in life happening that you have to be aware of, whether it's cost of living crisis, you know, war going on over in Ukraine, Sudan, all sorts. But I think something that we overlook is that someone being extremely happy and achieving something is news. Whether, you know, the wider society sees that, to that person and to those that are close around them, it's news and it's worth celebrating. And happy news makes us feel something. It makes us feel positive. It makes us feel good. It inspires us. So why are we not speaking more about that? Because in turn, we can show the world that it's not all doom and gloom.
Yeah, I think that's actually a very good point in there. I mean, when you look at the way you were talking about there, about the way that the news is put together, what it follows a set, and it's exactly the same in every single news, across every channel across the world, and it's thrown at you every hour, every single hour. You were given the same stuff over and over and over again, and all that stuff. It just makes you. It erodes your power. It makes you feel powerless. And I have a feeling that it's designed that way, because good news does sell. It's sold billions of books across the world. It's created films. It's created all kinds of stuff. But the general consensus out there is to keep control on everybody. And the best way to keep control is to make people feel that they have no control. Yeah. And by throwing bad news and, well, nothing you could do about it, and the interest rates have gone up and cost of living has gone up and trans people are bad and all this kind of stuff. It's designed. It's not a mistake in any way. And, you know, I think one of the best things you can ever do is turn off the news. Turn it off.
Yeah.
Who cares if some politician has sold a passport? You know?
Yeah. Well, like when we think about it, there is, you know, we live in a capitalist society, and they have to, you know, maintain viewers. They need viewers in order to sell ad space, whether it's on TV or on the radio. They need to sell newspapers. So they need you coming back for more. So by creating this society of doom and gloom where you feel helpless, you rely on them to tell you what's happening next, so that, you know, it becomes this weird sort of relationship where you are hanging on every single word that they say. And we've all been through it. We only have to think back to the pandemic a few years ago, where we didn't know what the hell was going on. We'd tune into the news. There'd be those briefings from Downing Street trying to tell us what's going on. There'd be news focusing on certain aspects of the pandemic. But we were in a state of limbo. We were, as a nation, we had no eyes and ears because we were at home. So we relied on that even more. And when we all cast our minds back and think about how we were feeling then, it was this moment of dread in limbo. But how many people can actually say during that time, I was also able to think about the positive stuff? Because we've been essentially kind of herded down this little path of doom and gloom is here, but stick with us and we'll show you the best bits.
Do you know, I have to say, I think, okay, pandemic, not great, but it was also really great in a lot of other ways. And I saw something, I mean, as a management consultant, I saw a lot of things happen that would never have happened if it hadn't been for the pandemic. And the biggest thing was everybody was stuck at home going, well, who am I? Or I always wanted to do that. Or, you know, how can I live in these four walls? And they really, you know, it really forced you to be inside your own head, which is not an opportunity you get very often. And because you don't get that opportunity, because you're so busy just getting on with life, you know, we kind of, oh, I'll deal with that when I retire.
Yeah.
But now everybody essentially retires, you know, in their 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s, and 60s. They were all retired for the year with nothing to do. Not me. I didn't get that opportunity, but it didn't stop me. But the majority of people did. And regardless of, you know, coming out as trans or just being your true self, the amount of people who have changed how their life works enormously. They have revalued how they spend their time and what they're prepared to do in their life. And I really think that a lot of people found a lot of their power, trans power as well, during that pandemic, because they had little to no choice. They couldn't shut the voices up in their heads. They had to deal with them. And that eventually means that you have to be honest with yourself. You can't bury it, you know, in the soil any longer. You can't stick your head in. You have to deal with what comes up, or there is no future for you.
Absolutely. And I think with it being a pandemic, with it being such a big unknown, there were people, I mean, I remember speaking to people thinking, you know what, I may as well come out. The world could end next month, next week. I might catch COVID and die. I may as well do this and have that chance, whether it's for a week or for a month. Why, you know, what's the point otherwise of trying to live a lie? And I've known so many people that have come out during lockdown because, like you said, they've had that chance to really think about things. And not just the trans community, like when we look at people who've had quite a significant change in their career, they've realized that for the past however many years, they've been doing the same thing day in, day out, a job that they perhaps fell into, and they've never had the passion for it at all. And they've started their own business and thought, this is actually where I need to be. This gives me joy in being able to be my own boss or whatever. And it's shown people that we can do it. And it's almost like, you know, protesting, but with, you know, we're kind of forced into it, where everybody comes together and thinks and says the same thing. And that's essentially what happened coming out of the pandemic. People were like, I don't want to go back to that crappy job that I had a boss that was just really working me so hard. And we ended up with gaps in the economy because we just couldn't find people to fill those jobs, which is bad for the economy, but great for people, great for mental health. And I love the fact that people took that power back for themselves and thought, this is my new direction. This is what I need.
Yeah. And actually, do you know what? A comment has just popped up in the chat here, talking about being stuck inside your houses and stuff during the pandemic, is that it also trapped people with other people who maybe weren't as understanding. And that, of course, is a very, very difficult thing to do. But I could imagine, and maybe I'm wrong, I'm stretching a little bit here, that when you get stuck in that toxic environment, that it makes you go, well, I'm never going to do that again. So awful at the time, but it probably gave you a lot of energy to make changes in your life once you were set free from COVID. I mean, I don't know, again, I'm reaching on that, but that seems to be sort of a long time. So awful at the time. And my heart goes out to you for having to suffer that. It's pretty awful, but
yeah,
you know,
I think that's a fair comment, to be fair. I mean, I knew people like who finally escaped from their abusive partners. It was a horrible time to have to do it, but it was a case of it's now or never, because back, you know, before the pandemic, I could go to work, I had some sort of escape, but now, and it, you know, they can't. So in a way, it has kind of allowed people to fast forward to what they actually needed to do. But I also think it's allowed people to be a lot more empathetic, you know, thinking about those who have a disability, who are stuck at home, you know, a lot of the time and aren't able to get around. It allowed us to see a world and an experience where we've previously been taking for granted our own abilities, because we've just been caught up in going to work, coming home and being busy all the time. We're now actually thinking we're all under the same rules. How do other people cope?
Yeah.
Is this I think what's nice about hearing you speak and sort of seeing your sort of presence online is you sort of got all of this there. I think there is definitely a focus on the sort of positivity aspect, but there is that realistic slant of this is how things are, and you're not ignoring that. And that's something I really appreciate. You know, this acknowledgement that things aren't that great at the moment for this community. What I wanted to ask was, how do you stay positive given what's going on at the moment?
A good supply of antidepressants. No, I mean, first of all, I will say yes. You know, I'm on antidepressants, and a lot of people are these days. But lean into the support and the help that you have access to, whether it is antidepressants. You know, we shouldn't shy away from things that could help us through certain moments. You know, whether it is a GP or whether it's a partner, a friend, even a pet, that kind of allows you to be seen, and you don't have to, you know, worry about being judged. You don't have to worry about having to be stealth or hide who you are. That is so important because it keeps you grounded, and you know, you don't spiral out of control, because there is a lot of stuff going on in our community. There's a lot of stuff aimed at our community, left, right, and center. And if we're not careful, we can easily drown in all that negativity. And, you know, I try not to sugarcoat too much. I'm not one of these people on social media where it's just toxic positivity. We have to be realistic. Like recently with the Equality Act and the proposed guidance and plans to raise the rights for trans people to have protection from discrimination. Everybody, as soon as that news broke, was thinking that's the end of it. You know, what an awful government we have. We need to move. We need to do this. And again, it goes back to the news painting it in such a dark doom and gloom way. But when you take a step back and think, okay, let's put this logically. If we make sure that all trans women have to now use the bathroom or the toilet that of the sex they were assigned at birth, then trans women would use the men's toilets. But what people are then forgetting, especially those that are against us, trans men would be using the women's toilets. Now, testosterone is a much more powerful hormone during a medical transition, which is why most of the time, trans masculine people pass better than trans women or trans feminine people. So think of it this way. Yes, they're trying to attack trans women and strip our discrimination rights, but they are also opening the door to actual cases of violence against women and girls in those single-sex spaces. So it's a massive own goal for them, because all a cisgender, sexual predator has to do, stick the head in the toilet, cooey, don't worry, I'm a trans man, let's go. Who's going to police that? Who's going to be able to stop that? So when you think of it like that, this massive piece of potential legislation change suddenly becomes nothing. It would have a massive impact on so many other areas. And when you put it that way, it isn't doom and gloom at all. Yes, they could try it, but it will take them a long time to enact that. So why are we worrying so much about it? Let's, worry about what you're going to have for dinner instead, because take that moment for yourself. Don't allow that media to lead you down this dark tunnel.
Sorry, Jeff, go on.
Are you suggesting the UK government aren't thinking things through? Because that's news to me, honestly.
The government, no? this UK government, what can I say about them, huh?
No, sorry, you go, Ray.
Well, actually, I love what you're talking about here, because there's, for every argument, there's a counter argument. Mm. I got that asking, well, how do you deal with the fact that people are saying that there are trans women when they've been a convicted rapist so they can get into the women's prison, and I'm like, good God, who comes up with these questions? But the reality is that the thing is you can spin that very easily on its head and go, well, in actual fact, that's not a trans woman. That's a cis criminal who has decided to lie to try and take advantage of the system. And you want us to take responsibility for that? Mm-hmm. Well, there was no answer to that one. But, you know, the thing is, you can't spin that on your head. And I think when we're talking about trans joy, I think the greatest thing is just personal joy. I think if you bring it down to that level, which is what you were talking about, it is personal joy, but wearing that personal joy on your sleeve and not allowing people to back you into a corner when they say something ridiculous. Because if you think about it, there's always a counter argument. There's always a counter argument. And when you think of the TERFs and all of these kind of guys, when you actually ask them to explain their reasoning, it comes down nothing more than, well, I just believe this. And that's not good enough. It's just not good enough. There's, you know, they're like, they're throwing all this stuff at us, but in actual fact, they are the ones with the most amount of hot air going.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, when you back them into a corner, and I've done it a couple of times, they have to back down and go, well, actually, you know, I can't really explain this, you know. My favorite one at the moment is when someone goes, well, how do you know you're trans? And how do you know this is the thing? It's like, okay, well, what are you then? What do you identify as? And I'll go, well, I'm straight and I'm cis. Right. Prove to me you're straight, because you look a bit gay to me. Prove to me you're straight. And watch them fumble.
That's exactly it. And like, it's almost like we have to prove our existence. We have to prove who we say we are, because they take being heterosexual, being cisgender as the default. And it isn't. You know, like when I say to people, do you realize that not all babies are born straight? It blows their minds, because they've been brought up in this world where being straight is the default. That's the norm. But how do you know a baby isn't gay? Because you can't speak to it. And the fact that it will later come out as gay, for example, it was always there. It's not something that someone suddenly thinks, you know what, I think I'll just be gay. You know, I fancy the hate crime and all that. So it is crazy, the sort of the arguments that you get. And I mean, I get it all the time on Twitter. I don't use it as much now, but it would always be, you know, keyboard warriors who have a lot to say, that they suddenly became biologists overnight. They have, you know, no profile picture, some stupidly long set of numbers in their username. And all they do is sit there throwing out hate. And I just think, what a sad existence you lead, you know.
Yeah.
That is all you do. And when you challenge them, it goes backwards and forwards, but it will always come down to the point where they say, I'm not here to play your silly games, and block you. That's when you know you have got to them to the point where they're so frustrated with you that you're not biting, that they just get rid of you, because they know they don't want another interaction with you. And it's recognizing for ourselves, for our own safeguarding, some people do not want to be educated. Some people come at you not because they want their opinion to be changed, not because they want a healthy debate, because they simply want to rant, they simply want to trigger you and to make sure you have a bad day. Because as far as they're concerned, I don't know, it does something for them. They get their kicks out of it. So recognizing which battle...
That's a power play again. It's another power play.
Exactly. Recognize the battles that you can and can't win. If you realize you're up against someone who is just there to be vile, then they want a reaction from you. Then take that power back. Don't give them the satisfaction of a response, but don't delete it either, because by deleting it, you're saying to them, your comments got to me, I'm getting rid of it. Just leave it, just ignore it. But, you know, if it's a comment on a post of mine on Instagram, I leave it, because I don't have to say anything, but just leaving that comment there, other followers, users that might see it will make their own mind up. They'll know who's the stupid idiot. So just leave it. You know, move on to other things. You don't have to fight every battle. You don't have to convince every single person.
Yeah, well, you're definitely not going to convince every person. That's for sure. Sorry, Jess.
It's all right. Do you feel similarly about sort of dealing with the sort of bigger sort of anti-trans campaigns? Do you feel like there's a level of sort of ignorance we need to employ to sort of drown them out, so to speak?
Yeah, I like with any situation like that where they shout, and if you shout loud, you know, back at them, they'll just shout even louder, and it just becomes a battle over volume, not actual substance. We know they're spouting lies. We know that they won't listen to actual statistics, because, you know, we all know there are lots of actual statistics and studies out there, but they've chosen to ignore them. So that says a lot about their angle and what their plans are. The more we talk about them, the more we give their agenda fuel. So let's just ignore them. They are a small minority who just happen to be really loud. So if we just turn away and, don't platform them, don't talk about them, then their words fall on, deaf ears, really. Then no one's really going to pick it up or give them traction. When we look at people like Posey Parker, if, she's aligned with some pretty dangerous organizations, but
actual Nazis, from what I understand at this stage.
Exactly. And the more we buy into that, the more we go onto Twitter and think, oh no, what's happening now? The more we're letting her and dominate our lives. That fear mongering that she wants, it's working. If we just know that Twitter's a horrible playground for bullies, don't go to the playground. It's really that simple. If there's a protest happening in your area, yeah, absolutely fine, get involved. But if it's happening on the internet space, it's everybody against everyone else. So you don't technically have to get involved. I'd rather just switch off and, I don't know, go and play with my dog or something else.
Yeah, I have to say I don't have a lot of time to be dealing with people that are just haters, frankly. But when people are up in my face, which definitely happens, and I get emails all the time because my contact details are everywhere on the internet now, so everybody knows who I am. So I tend to get a lot of very unsolicited emails and stuff like that that'll come at me, and they're all very ignorant and very stupid and stuff like that. But I have a tendency not necessarily to answer them, but I do it. What I don't do is I don't ignore them, because that makes them think they're right. So I don't like that. But what I do is I make them justify their position. So rather than spout statistics at it, I make them justify what they've said. So you just said that. Tell me where you got that from. Explain to me what evidence you're using to make that statement, and then shut up. Then shut up. Because they're not listening to you. But when they suddenly have to explain themselves, it becomes much more difficult. And what tends to happen is they tend to shut up.
Yeah.
And they tend to go away. So I very much like that. And that is literally negotiation 101. This is how you deal with a bully, is you make them justify their position. And there are very simple ways to do that. But what it does is it takes the wind out of their sails, and they simply go away without you having to argue with them, which is the most important thing.
Yeah, absolutely. And you've always got to think about yourself, your mental health, especially because when you put yourself out there and people know who you are an easy, visible target. So it's important to know, what to do, how to handle yourself. And the other thing I like to do is, when people are saying you don't deserve rights, your groomers X, Y, and Z, I like to think, okay, well, let's take trans out of that sentence. Let's replace it with Black, for example. So when you're talking about a trans woman not deserving rights, okay, let's see how that sentence holds up. If you take trans out and replace it with Black, does a Black woman deserve human rights? Over to you. And, by just that simple reframing of their message or what they're trying to get at, you can really poke holes in their argument and let them see just how stupid it is.
I think we're touching on a lot of points of something I was introduced to recently, actually, and this element of digital self-care, sort of turning off when appropriate, not just sort of doom scrolling through the news every day, because it just isn't helping anyone, I don't think, unfortunately.
No. Things like other accounts. I mean, when I first started my Instagram account, when I came out, I was following all sorts of people. And then quickly I realized I was finding myself competing with some people, and it was really getting my mental health down. And it got to the point where I thought, I can't, I'm struggling to deal with my own gender dysphoria here, because I go online and I'm seeing people who came out after me looking absolutely fantastic. And it dawned on me, well, why am I following them? If they trigger me on my feed, why am I following them? They could be great people, but if they are triggering to you, you don't owe them that follow. You owe yourself, that mental health care. So unfollow them. Follow them again when you're better. At the end of the day, you don't owe anyone that. So that for me was a really important lesson, because it allowed me to kind of take back control over my own digital space.
We've had a really great question from Kate here, sort of following on from this. Kate's wondering, what do you feel is the next step, or the next few steps in building towards a more positive trans future?
Ooh. Healthcare is an important one, because that's something that affects all trans people at the moment. And I know that not every trans person wants to medically transition, but by and large, many do, because it's a way to ease the gender dysphoria. But most importantly, it's almost like a way to say to society, take me seriously because I am doing this. You know, it's not just a phase, as some people seem to suggest it is. And not that we have to prove ourselves in that way, but it kind of ticks a lot of boxes and allows us to move forward at once. But it's not accessible. It's like a postcode lottery at the moment, depending which gender clinic you're referred to under the NHS. So if we have easier access to healthcare, mental health will be much more improved, especially for the younger generation who don't have to grow up manifesting all these negative and harmful things internally. They can actually just be themselves and be accepted and feel that acceptance and feel that love. So healthcare is something that we all need to really come together for. And when I had the chance to take the NHS or NHS England to the High Court for a judicial review, that was something I felt I had to do, because, again, going back to something I said at the start, I know I've got a privilege. I know I've been able to go private. Not everyone can, but you know, when it comes to things like medically transitioning, it's a financial privilege. It's also a genetic privilege, and it's a bit of a lotto. But at least we should give everybody the same chance. It's about equity as much as it is equality. So, taking the NHS commissioning board to the High Court to challenge their unlawful waiting times, which it should be within 18 weeks. But as we all know, it's all in years. That for me was my way of saying this needs to be for everybody. So that's a step, because healthcare is a human right and we are all entitled to it. By having all this gatekeeping towards healthcare, it oppresses an entire community. We're treated as, you know, second-class citizens because we're not allowed that immediate access. Cisgender women can pretty much walk into a GP and get access to HRT for menopause. They don't need different diagnoses. They don't need a waiting list of years. Yet for the exact same stuff, a trans woman has to be referred, has to be diagnosed, has to be seen by a second specialist, then put onto another waiting list. So we really need to balance that out and realize that healthcare is that human right. I also think people need to be a lot more open with who they are, because visibility is the key. If we can show the world that we don't do any harm, we are simply getting from A to B, that we're boring. In fact, you know, like I always say, it's like tattoos. If you were to say to someone 50 years ago, I have a tattoo, you'd be met with a million questions. They'd be looking at it, rubbing it to see if it really comes off, asking you questions like, why would you do that? What is it going to look like in a million years' time? Or did it hurt? How was it? All sorts. If you tell someone you've got a tattoo now, so what? You'll be met with a kind of half enthused, so what? Most people do. And in fact, I think that the last count, 1 in 4 people in the UK have a tattoo, or at least one tattoo. So if you were to say to people, I have a tattoo, and they're met with this unenthusiastic, so what? That is tattoo culture being normalized in a society, that people are so exposed to tattoos now. It's no longer a shock. It's no longer, you know, a sign of somebody who's a bit sketchy or anything like that. It's just someone who's got a bit of artwork on them. Imagine if trans people could be like that, can be as boring as tattoos. You say to someone, I'm trans, and they're just like, so that's where we need to be. And we can only really get there by everybody just doing their thing, but being proud and being visible as they do their thing.
It's that sort of awful realization you have sort of post sort of coming out, post saying those words to yourself, in terms of, if I'd have seen someone doing this, you know, 5-10 years ago, if I'd just seen a regular human being, then, you know, I might have had those words with myself maybe that little bit sooner, wouldn't you? Visibility is really important.
Yeah.
It's what we really want to do here.
Absolutely. Yeah. Be the person you never had when you're grown up.
Yeah, that day-to-day visibility is a massive thing. I couldn't tell you the amount of people who just said, yeah, there's all these influencers and they're all on Instagram and they're all selling stuff, they're all movie stars and all this kind of stuff. That's fine. I'm a normal person. I code for a living. I, work from home. where am I represented? I don't see that. It's like, well, you represent that. That's you. You're the one who just needs to walk around the street going, this is who I am.
Yeah.
Nobody's really going to do anything about it. Really, there's only a very teeny tiny portion of society that wants to get in any way violent or physical or anything like that. The majority of people, they might stare at you, they might heckle, but then that's it. You know, it's not, I realize that's not comfortable. I get it. I understand. But if that's the worst that can really happen, you know, we're not living in Albania, you know, or Armenia, where being gay is a mandatory criminal sentence of 5 years. You know, we no longer live in that society. But if we were in the 60s, that's where we would have been. But we don't live in that. Yeah. And the more we normalize this with normal people and just let them decide for themselves and go, yeah, you know what, there's not really a big deal here, then the easier it's going to be, not necessarily for us, but for the generations coming after us.
Yeah. And I think also having and like empowering ourselves with trans joy is such a key part for that, because when you are walking down the street, people snigger, people laugh, people heckle you, you are proud in who you are. You know what it took for you to get to that moment in time where you can be visible in the open. Own it. No one can ever take that away from you. And no matter what they say, it will do nothing to take away the strength and the determination you had to come out and get to that point. And the other way I like to look at it is those people that laugh at you, it will quickly become boring for them too. You know, when I first came out, I had people sniggering, laughing at me, shouting at me across the road, things like that. I knew for a fact that, you know, if they were going to a pub later that night, they would have said, oh, I saw a man in a dress earlier this morning. Yes, they'd all have a laugh. But that's it. You've infiltrated their conversation. You're not even there, but you've infiltrated that conversation. The conversation will quickly move on. And they might see another trans person a few days, a few months later. They'll again go back to their friends. I saw another trans person. Well, how many times are they going to be able to say, I saw a trans person, I saw a man in a dress, before that becomes really dull and tiresome within that circle? And without you even being there, without you being aware of it, this topic of trans people existing in our society has become normalized in a group conversation amongst people who previously would never have tolerated trans people. But because it's suddenly become this, you know, no big deal. So what? We've had this conversation before. We've normalized our existence in that one group. Now, if we can do that with every group, think of how powerful we'd be in terms of being recognized and having equality, having equity, and having, you know, the same rights as everybody else.
You've sort of used those sort of ideas, and you've been doing a lot of activist work over the last few years, you know, working with gendered intelligence and the London Met even. I was wondering how that work has sort of helped you maintain a bit of a positive outlook, really, sort of doing the work.
I think, I mean, it's certainly like working with the Met Police, for example. You hear all these stories about, you know, how bad they are, how awful they are. I mean, don't get me wrong, there are, you know, really awful people within the Met, and, you know, certain reports have exposed that. But we have to remember that there are awful people in any organization. You know, it's not just one police force. Since the report came out, it's been found that, you know, there are horrible people in the fire service, in other police forces. So just because they're the ones we hear about doesn't mean everybody within that force is exactly like that. And also, we've got to think, if we don't like it, we can do something about it. You know, on social media, we always hear all the time, the police need to do better. You know, the police and the LGBTQ plus community have always had this very brittle relationship in terms of, you know, not trusting them, or, you know, dating back to Section 28, Stonewall Uprising, you know, over in the US, things like that, where we felt oppressed, like betrayed. We felt like the police don't represent us. Well, we need to move on from that, because we're in a society where if we need help, there's someone breaking into our house, there's someone threatening us with a gun or a knife, who else are we going to call? You know, nice words aren't going to diffuse that situation. So if we're in a society where we can't really exist without them, but they're not doing well or they're not doing better, then there's no point saying you need to do better if they genuinely haven't got a clue how to do better. So why not go in and tell them exactly how to do better? And that's what I love about working with the Crown Prosecution Service and the Met Police, and also with West Midlands Police, that they are incredibly perceptive when we talk about trans inclusion. We talk about not misgendering people when you take a phone call from them, they're trying to report a hate crime, how you treat them as a witness and a victim and things like that. It doesn't fall on deaf ears. There are people in there. There are new recruits who, before they get assigned to their BCU, will sit in a room, will talk about these things openly and constructively. And you'll be surprised at how many people just go, yeah, I can see that actually. Yeah, I can see how, if I was to be a bit, come across as a bit stern or don't use the right language, how that victim is going to suddenly be on the back foot. And then all of a sudden they'll just think back to, well, the police can't be trusted, and you get nowhere. So even just telling them that that language is problematic and this is why you'll get a negative reaction, they do listen. And doing the work that I do, that's allowed me to realize it's not as bad as we all think it is. There's a lot of work to do, yes, but why not be the change? Why not get involved in that work and see that there can be a lot of good coming out of it as well?
I think the majority of people are, sorry, Jess, the majority of people are actually very good people. I get people stop me all the time asking ridiculous questions, and as long as you're patient with them and answer it, they go, oh yeah. But that's one more positive, positive experience that they have had, which they will, as you said, say, well, I was in the pub and I met this guy and wow, that just kind of blew my mind. And so that this kind of stuff really does work. And I think that again, that's down to that visibility, but not just the visibility, it's also allowing other people to educate, because if it comes from us, it's one thing, but if it comes from somebody else, so if you stand up in front of a room and say, well, I'm trans and there's nothing, I'm just a normal person, that's fine. But there's a little bit of, you should say that because you're trans. But if, your husband or your wife or your best friend or your colleague stands up and says that, I hate to say it, but there's a little bit more gravitas when it comes from somebody who's already part of their team.
Yeah, exactly.
And, but so again, the more visibility we have and the more people go, well, you know what? Actually, I don't know what you're all talking about. It's not really a big deal. That's where you start to gain the momentum. So it's once the cis community starts saying this stuff, and they are saying it, because I meet them all the time, they are saying it, but the more that gets out, and again, it's that chain reaction of the stone gathering moss, but we've got to push the stone.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think when it comes to visibility, we've also got to be careful of being restrictive about that. We need to be inclusive. We need to say to allies as well, be visible. It's not just about us being visible. We want allies to be visible for other allies, because right now it's a difficult situation politically. Allies are finding it very difficult to be allies. They don't know how to be allies. They're scared of getting into arguments with gender critical groups or saying the wrong thing or anything like that. So if we can just let them know, we know you're trying, but please just be active, be very proactive, and be visible in your trying, that in itself will inspire other allies who previously would have thought being an ally is really difficult. It's almost like being an activist. But when they realize just how simple it can be, more people will be willing to actually give it a go. And when we look at things like pronouns, a lot of people are doing it now. When that first became a thing, there was a lot of friction, a lot of wondering, why do we even need this? But simply by seeing other people doing it, it's become normalized. Other people thought, well, yeah, I can give that a go. Why not?
Yeah, I'd had that same thing at just before I came out with work. I'd started a new job and was sort of in the process of about to do it, but seeing the pronouns in an email signature was just like, oh, I think it'll probably be okay. Like that was the push I needed. But further than your point, I think what you're saying essentially is that past visibility training is really important here. And that's why sort of the work you're doing with the CPS and the Met's so important.
Yeah, it's using our lived experience for good, because we have something, like the three of us on this webinar now, we have something that cannot really be taught from a book. It's not anything where, you could just do a course in it. this is our lived experience, and every single lived experience is so rich but so different. So the more we're able to hear about these lived experiences, the more people realize just how diverse trans people are, and that, you know, a lot of our experiences do align with cisgender experiences, whether it's, you know, trans women who get catcalled out in the streets, or, you know, trans masculine people who feel like they have to live up to a certain societal expectation in terms of strength, physicality, or anything like that. We share a lot, and we need to just acknowledge that. And it always used to make me laugh when trans women come out. Society kind of expects trans women to have this size 8 hourglass figure, you know, big boobs, long hair. And I always thought, why? Because cisgender women have spent years campaigning against that. Yet here you are, you know, there are cisgender women who are saying, well, if you're a trans woman, you've got to look like this. There's a certain hypocrisy. But when we kind of realize that our values do align, our fight is the same, that, you know, let's join together and let's use each other to actually move forward with this fight. Don't squabble and fight amongst ourselves, because we're after the same thing at the end of the day.
I want to touch on one last point before we sort of wrap it up, because I know we're getting to the end here. You've been working a lot with Brighton Pride over the last, not Brighton Pride, I wrote that in the question as well the other day. You're working with Birmingham Pride, it's the dyslexia, I promise, as Director of Innovation. And with Trans Pride coming up over the next few months, I was just wondering if you see a crossover between the concepts of Trans Pride and Trans Joy specifically.
Yeah, I mean, when we look at joy, I think that in itself becomes pride, because to take pride in yourself, it's almost like an unknown, you know, like trans pride. Well, what is pride for being trans? Straight away, you think of all the negatives. What's there to be proud of? But when we think about the joy, when we think about our own rich experiences, when we think about how far every single one of us has come, even if you're not out yet, you still have a lived experience. And that experience, even if it's just, I don't know, thinking about one day I'm going to come out, one day I'm going to look beautiful, one day people will accept me. There's a joy in that sort of kind of, I don't know, I wouldn't call it daydreaming, but in that kind of ambition, that knowing that I could do this. And that, I remember way before I came out, I used to toy with the idea of what would happen if I came out. And that gave me this little sense of hope, which in turn did kind of keep me going. I didn't realize it at the time, but that did keep me going, because it's almost like a part of me is thinking, well, I need to keep going just in case that does become a reality. And knowing that what I've been through to get to where I am, that becomes pride. I'm proud of being trans. I'm proud of all the things I've overcome, all the things I'm still struggling with. You know, I don't need to have all the answers, but I'm here and I'm present and I'm visible. So that fills me with pride. And in my role at Birmingham Pride, being Director of Innovation, it's my job to basically find ways to allow others within the community, you know, the wider LGBTQ plus community, to feel that, to feel part of it, to feel connected, and also to create those things, those initiatives, those schemes that allow them to feel that. Because Pride, most people seem to think it's once a year. And, you know, with Pride festivals, it's like a weekend and then that's it, that's the end of it. But certainly at Birmingham Pride, we work all year round. It's my job to look for things that don't exist. Speak to the community. What do you want? What will help you to feel good about yourself? What will help you to feel that pride and be able to take that power back for yourself? What do you need? Tell me, let's find a way to make that happen. And that by working together with the community, we can create a lot more positivity, because people then think, you know what, I do have something to live for. I do have services that meet my needs. And I do have a huge community and a chosen family that is there for me. And there's a lot to live for.
Amazing, really amazing. Can I ask what you're looking forward to most at the summer event this year?
Seeing people, just the sheer number of people coming together is overwhelming. like seeing people of all ages from different backgrounds all coming together, being in that space and sharing that space and just talking to people. I remember the Trans Pride a few years ago where we ended up in Soho Square. I got talking to someone because they had a dog with them, with a little scarf around them, a pride flag. So we started talking, and I came away with like meeting loads of people with like lots of contacts. To this day, we still keep in touch, and it's that unity, knowing that everybody that is there has your back. No words can really describe how immense that feels. So that's that feeling is what I'm really looking forward to as we march, as we walk in unity. People may shout, people may do whatever, but who cares? You feel invincible in those moments.
Yeah, I mean, we went to Trans Pride London with our group last year, and seeing 30,000 people. I don't think there was a final figure on it, but right in front of the Ritz, just best day of my last year, at the very least.
Yeah, you feel part of something. And I think when we are broken up, like during lockdown, in our everyday lives, I mean, the trans community in England and Wales is approximately like 262,000 according to Census 2021. There are very few of us, and we're scattered around, but it's those moments that bring us together that we really kind of share each other's energy and really recharge, and we go away feeling like on an absolute high that we've been part of something, this massive movement moving through London, and it's phenomenal.
I'll have to see if I can bring my dog to the next Pride event. 9-year-old husky. I'm not sure he's going to make it through the parade, but we'll try our best.
Huskies are loud. At least that they'll shout for you as well.
100%. Cool.
Wonderful. Well, good. Well, look, that's Eva, we've taken up a lot of your time, and we can. I mean, it's very obvious why you're doing such a great job and how you're so powerful, because you speak with such passion, but you don't just lived experience, not just like, as you said, read it in a book. Like, you live this every single day, and for me, that's a very, very big thing to see that visibility and to see the power that you have in yourself, because that really provides power for other people. And that's just an amazing energy to have. So I have to say thank you so much for coming here and for spending your time with us, and for just being yourself and just showing the wonderful work that you're really doing, because it's just phenomenal. And I'm very motivated now to get out there and go, yeah, let's do more, and I guess that's kind of a large part of what you do is to inspire that in people. So it's wonderful. Thank you so much for doing that, and keep up the good work. Keep in touch with us as well, because we are a very seriously growing community here, and it's wonderful to I mean, we see so many people grow every single day. When you look back even in a 6-month period where somebody was then and where they are now, it's incredible to see that. I mean, that is living their own joy, living their own pride, which is what this is really all about. So if it wasn't for people like you, these conduits probably wouldn't exist. So thank you so much for everything that you do, really. So thank you.
Thank you for having me on again. It's been it's amazing to share this space with you, and thank you to everyone who tuned in as well.
Yes, thank you, everybody. Thank you, everybody. So again, if you're watching the replay on this, and you have any questions or any comments, please just put them in the comment section. We'll get them across to Eva, and we'll get them answered for you. But other than that, thank you so much. And there's been lots of chat going on in sort of in the chat in here, so it's marvelous to see that everybody's very involved in this. But look, thank you for tuning in today, and we look forward to seeing you on the next one. But until then, take care, everybody, and goodbye. So cheers.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everyone. Cheers. Bye.
Thanks so much for watching. Please subscribe just so you won't miss out on anything we do. Thanks so much.
Bye.